is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Dark, Season 1, Episode 3, Past and Present. In this episode, we get to spend most of our time with Mikkel back in 1986 and see what went on with the disappearance of Mads and what was going on between some of the people, which really changes the context of some of the things that are happening in the present. Also, I would like to register my profound pride in Mikkel because he is doing so much better than I would be in his situation. Like, shout out to Mikkel for fucking keeping his head, because I just think I would have hurled myself off a cliff. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Jill for commissioning this episode. There isn't another episode after. There's like two more after this, I think, that she has commissioned. And after that, there isn't one for about a month. So everybody just keep in mind, if you are interested in making sure that the show goes without too many more interruptions like that, go and make a commission. And I'm going to, I promise, by the time the next commission does happen, I will rewatch these first 5 episodes again before I restart. And that way everything is very fresh. I just wanted to address that right out of the gate. So this episode, I mean, I had expressed some real dismay at the end of the previous episode upon seeing where Mikkel ends up. And I have to say that every fear I had was confirmed and proven to be, if anything, underestimating how bad it was going to be. I think what's so much more like, it would be bad enough to be thrown back in time and have no understanding of where you are or how it happened or like anything like that is already terrible. But the fact that Mikkel is thrown back in time and his parents exist and don't know him. This is not a wacky fucking Back to the Future adventure where he just gets roped into some antics with his parents and it's very whimsical and whatever. This is a emergency situation with a child, you know, who has no agency in this world. That he can't go and just like get an under-the-table job as a waiter somewhere and try and, like, make it in 1986. That's not a fucking option. He's a kid. And I just can't imagine how terrifying this would be. And I'm really curious because, like, I don't know how many of you read books that had something like time travel or, like, a portal to another place or even, like, things where, like, in a sitcom, somebody got hit on the head and all of a sudden they're acting totally different, right? Like it's a real goofy, like 80s, 90s sitcom trope. And you as a child would always just be like, just go back to the place that you were when it happened. Just hit him on the head again and he'll go back to normal. Like all of these things as a kid, going back to the source of whatever it was seems like the obvious thing. So when Mikkel goes back to the cave finally, it makes a ton of sense. But I have to admit that as an adult, because we have all this other context for what's been going on in this town, seeing these like people who have been abducted being experimented on and everything going on with like the cave being connected to the nuclear power plant, because we have all of that, and I assume wherever Mikkel ended up, it's because something was done to him or because somebody intended to do something like it was basically what I'm saying is he didn't stumble through something that just happened to be there. It feels like circumstances were put in motion by human choices and he happened to be in the middle of those choices, but that this isn't something that would have happened if he had just been out walking in the woods, like, and nothing else was going on. It feels like what was happening in the caves and with Eric is what spurred on this whole event, right? So as a grown-up and having that context from watching the other episodes, going back to the cave didn't even occur to me, because what I'm thinking is that the psychopath that is out here murdering people and who probably took meds is in that cave, and stay the fuck away from there, right? That's how I'm thinking about it. But he goes back there, and it turns out he very nearly, like, manages to get home. He's not wrong. It's just how this all happened. You can't undo something when you don't know how it was done in the first place. So I just can't tell you, like, again, how impressed I am with Mikkel's presence of mind, because it just, I don't know what I would have done. I really don't. It just is so completely terrifying to me. The anxiety that I had throughout this episode, when every option that I thought of for something that he could do, I would mentally shoot down and be like, no, we can't do that. And it seemed like Mikkel has already thought of those. He's doing the best he can, right? So let's first of all, he decides to go into the house. We start right from where we had left off, because he had gotten to the house. Ulrich was leaving. He gets on his motorbike with his girlfriend, and he takes off. Well, Mikkel is standing there, and he winds up walking inside, and his grandmother is laying on the bed, or on the couch, my bad, watching this commercial for a candy bar, which is the wrapper that she found in the woods in the present that she shows to Ulrich and tells him, this is your brother's favorite candy bar. And I want to know, I am assuming that this candy bar was invented for the show, but I would love to know if there are any Germans out there who know that this is a real candy bar and that the ad she was watching was a real ad. Because, you know, we've watched a couple of music videos, and they're real music videos from the 80s. And it would be pretty fun if this ad she's watching is something that, like, people who grew up in Germany would be watching and go, oh my God, I forgot about that commercial. I think that would be a really fun little thing. I love running across weird old commercials. Those of you who have gone to the Alamo Draft House know that, like, they'll frequently have pre-show entertainment that they've, like, assembled together from YouTube videos and things that are relevant to whatever the movie is going to be. And sometimes they will have old commercials, especially for Marvel movies, for, like, you know, superhero figures and whatnot, that even though I never played with those things, I recognize the commercial from watching Nickelodeon, and I'm just like, holy shit. So anybody watching this who knows, let me know, because I would find that kind of fun. But anyway, so yeah, he wanders in, and it's such a fucking heart-wrenching moment, because his grandmother is laying there, and he thinks that this is his mom. And he says, Mama, and she sits up, thinking it's her son. Guys, can we just talk for a second about how fucking heartbreaking that is? Like, oh, that's horrifying. Having a child that's almost the exact age as a child you lost wander into your home and call you mama, and they've been missing. Of course you would think that was your kid. And the absolute horrible disappointment, like, this is so deeply fucked up. And the way that she thinks it's him and comes up to him and is looking at him like unwilling to believe he isn't her child, because it has to be. Of course it has to be. And then assuming he must know where Mads is. If he's not Mads, then he has to know where he is or something about it. What are you doing here? Say something. And she's like clinging to him. And he pulls away from her and runs off as she just fucking implodes and says, when is he coming back? Guys, I could not. This is so rough. And her acting, her complete despair when she realizes after her hopes are raised like out of nowhere, you know, it's just so unfair. I just hate it so much. And I had been, when we're in the present and we see Jana, she is like leathery and lined in this way that her husband isn't really. And I'm starting to realize that, like, this bitch just went through it. That's why her husband is coping in a whole other way that doesn't seem to take the same kind of toll because he's selfish and lashing out instead. But she is fucking dying in slow motion. And I'm getting, like, the fact that she is as tan as she is as well in the present makes me think that she is somebody who fucking went out in the woods every fucking spare moment that she had and just, like, looked for him after a while, after the police probably sort of gave up, right? It feels like the police have already sort of given up, but we'll get into that all in a second. So this scene just fucking ripped my heart out. I was not ready. So yeah. Mikkel runs off, understandably, because good God, he is finally starting to really realize, I think. It's not until he's with the cop that he gets confirmed that this is, what's going on. But for now, we go to Inez. And Inez, it took me a while to remember, she is Michael's mother, Michael being the guy who hung himself in the first scene of the show, and Jonas's father. She is a nurse, and at this point in time, she does not have any family. And it's a really interesting thing to me that they say that specifically. She doesn't have any family. Guys, is Mikkel Michael? Is that what's going on here? Because I'm about to fucking lose my shit, y'all. She doesn't have any family. She doesn't have a husband. She doesn't even seem to have a boyfriend. She's about to, take over a shift from a nurse who's got family things going on, and she is totally unbothered by the fact that she doesn't have those things in her life. It seems like to me. This doesn't feel like she's putting on a face. It really feels like she is dedicated to her job, and she is not at all concerned about starting a family or doing anything with a relationship or anything like that. She is fine where she is. And then Mikkel turns up. Mikkel, no, such a huge leap. Is that why he killed himself? Because the date was approaching when he would disappear? Is that it? But why would he feel the need to kill himself? Does he think something is going to happen with the two of them? Because basically, you would think that Michael would be wanting to bail from planet Earth when he finds out that Ulrich and what's her name, Katharina, that they just had a son and named him Mikkel. You would think that would be the moment when he's just like, you know what, fuck this, I'm out. But he waits for the day Mikkel disappears. And I feel like that's something, but I don't know what it is. It has to be the same person, right? What? I don't get it. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Because Mikkel's not, Michael, it looked like was older than Hannah, his wife. Maybe he's not. Maybe it's just they're close enough in ages. Because Mikkel is 11 in a world where Ulrich and Katharina are 17, 16 years old. I guess it's not a terribly huge difference in ages. It might just be undetectable. What though? Okay. Anyway, I'm going off. See, guys, this is the thing. I am figuring this all out as I'm talking to you. So anyway, Inez, she winds up being the one to sort of keep an eye on Mikkel until he finally like runs off on his own. And she is really the first person in the entire episode to treat him like a person. Everybody else is sort of like, Ulrich is super dismissive because he doesn't know who this kid is. He goes to the high school because his mother's the principal, and instead his young mom tells him that the principal is a man, and also like kind of taunts him about like, aren't you a little young to be like dropping acid or taking LSD, something like that. So nobody is taking him at all seriously. When he goes to the cop decides that he has to be like part of a practical joke, or it's a practical joke makes it sound like this cop is taking this lightly. That's the opposite of the truth. This cop takes this alleged prank very, very seriously. He thinks that Mikkel is part of like a setup that Ulrich has created to fuck with him. And I have a lot of questions about this cop's relationship with Ulrich, because so his name is escaping me right now with the name of the cop, but he is so antagonistic towards Ulrich, and it could be for a couple of reasons, and I'm very curious. Like, first of all, I want to assume, based on what we have seen of Ulrich, that he is a bit of a pain in the ass and probably does get up to some shit and cause trouble in the neighborhood. So I'm just going on that assumption that he's like probably just kind of bad news bears, like the way teenagers are, not aggressively in a way that would be, necessarily permanently damaging, but he's just somebody who is like kind of a bane to the existence of police in a small town. That's how I think of this relationship right out of the gate. But then there's the disappearance of Mads on top of it. And this cop like goes into Ulrich's house and his mother Jana's house and just starts like getting in his face in a way that's super unprofessional and feels really personal. And it could be a couple things. My suspicion here is that I think this cop thinks Ulrich had something to do with his own brother's disappearance, and that Ulrich is making them look like fools for fun. That's just the kind of vibe that there's something about how much he despises Ulrich that feels like more than just, oh, he's an annoying teenager. He thought that this kid was capable of killing an entire herd of sheep. That this is the kind of thing that Ulrich would be out there doing. That feels like somebody who really believes the worst of a person, and that they're like a borderline psychopath that would just like to torment animals, right? He even asks about like devil worship because Ulrich is listening to like death metal, and he has like, satanic stuff in his room, like, jerk off motion. So he's buying into this whole like dumb teenager thing that I think we all have like our moments of like, yeah, I'm really edgy with whatever. But it feels like he buys into it for a reason. Like he really thinks Ulrich has something to do with this, or he doesn't think Ulrich has anything to do with it, but Ulrich is so public about his disdain for the way the police have handled things that it's making him specifically as the police chief look bad. And he takes it really personally how Ulrich is like sort of taunting him, he thinks. Which, I mean, when they have that confrontation in the bedroom, Ulrich is very open with like how shitty he thinks this cop is, and he even tells his mother, like, sort of in a mean-spirited moment, because again, he's getting her hopes up. Oh, did you hear, Mama? They found a new lead in the case. And like puts this cop on the spot in a way that's really like cruel, kind of. So I feel like it could just be this cop's pride cannot handle the fact that he has failed so utterly to recover this child, and that another child is fucking taunting him for it and like poking at that wound. I could be wrong. But I feel like it's one of those things. So I don't know. I'm just really, really curious what really is going on there, because one could just be like, I have trouble dismissing this as just, oh, this cop just doesn't like Ulrich because he's caused trouble before. It feels like more than that to me. And the way that when Mikkel wanders into his office and is like, my father is Ulrich, he's like, the Ulrich, in this way that I'm like, what's that about? Like, he said it in the way that you would expect somebody to say who lives in a small town that has like football. You know, those of you who are from the South might get that a little bit more. I didn't truly get it until I moved down here. But like, high school football means something down here in a way that it does not up north. And people would know who you are if you are really, really good. And that's sort of the vibe he has at first. Like almost admiring in his voice. But then we really quickly see that that's not it at all. So, guys, I don't know. I have a lot of questions about that. So, okay, let's jump over to Charlotte, because this bitch is keeping her eye on shit. She has her finger on the pulse. I don't know what she has put together and what she knows, but it puts her moment of seeing all of the dead birds really into context, because this first scene that we see, she is looking at this bird that she found, and she winds up taking this dead bird that seems to have died for like no reason. She takes it back to her house and does this incredibly intricate sketch of it that's actually like shockingly good. I mean, she's got some fucking skills, right? And she puts it into a journal with the date where she found it, everything. And when she does that, it's right around the time when all the birds start to fall from the sky in the field that the cop is in, when he goes to try and investigate what could be going on with these sheep. Now, I don't know if she, as a kid, found out about that field full of dead birds or not. I hope that she did, that was added to her little like list of facts. But even if she didn't, and she walks out here as an adult and sees all these dead birds, I am really hoping that she's going to start to put that together. We shall see. There's a lot of things that I want people to put together that they do not. So, all right, we've got this whole thing with Claudia, who, like I said, is Regina's mother. I don't think we've met her before, but she is in the car heading to her first day at work. I don't know what her daughter is doing in the car here. Like, does she drop her off at school and then she heads to work, I guess? But she is really, really disdainful of her daughter. Like, it is so hard to watch the way that she talks to her. Would you look at yourself? You can't go to school like this. Sometimes I think you have no idea what it is I do. Food, clothes, fencing classes. Who pays for all of that? First of all, fencing classes? Rad. I hope that she kept up with that. But you can't even bother to comb your hair. You look like a limp dish rag. So, you know, normally a parent would see this and figure out that their child has some shit going on. Maybe they're suffering and you are failing. Just a thought. But this bitch does not think of that. All she can think of is the way Regina reflects on her. Not in a way that's substantial, where you're like, oh, my kid seems like they're in a bad place, and how does that reflect on me as a parent? No. Just image. That's it. It has nothing to do with the substance of the situation. So she is out here berating her kid, whom we see later has either attempted suicide for realsies, or at the very least is self-harming and building towards attempting suicide. fucking, this girl is a disaster, and her mother seems to be completely unaware and not care. I don't know if she did actually commit suicide, if her mother would treat her any differently, because she seems super, super self-absorbed. And I feel like this is important information because not only does it give us some perspective on the pain that Regina must feel all the time, because she seemed terrible, right? Like, well, the couple of episodes before this, the few times we've seen her, she just seemed like a real shit. But also, it lets us know that Claudia is somebody for whom image and reputation is paramount importance. And she is going to be a great fit for a company that is keeping the kind of secrets that it turns out this company is keeping. I still don't really know what those secrets are. I don't feel like I've got a good grasp of that at all. But I feel like there's a lot of moments with Claudia where we see who she is in a way that is very revealing. So she gets out of her car and is heading into the building. And this dude, who is the one that I think is in the home later, and who like wanders down the street and says it's happening again, it's happening again. I think this is that guy. He is, first of all, he has a scar on one side of his face. And he is the one who gives her a journey through time. This guy also wanders down the street saying it's happening again. He knows something. Something happened to him. What's going on? Who this? And he has a huge crush on her. He is like, I mean, it is kind of adorable, but she's obviously so uninterested. And Helge, that's his name. She just, you know, he's the help. He's out here like sweeping, and he's, I guess, maybe part of like the security team or something, but just not at her level. She's the fucking head honcho now, you know? And he has like a little gift for her, and it turns out to be that book, and she just takes it and like leaves. And it's really clear to him that none of that went the way that he wanted it to go. He's like out here congratulating her, telling her that the board voted for her unanimously, like really like building her up, you know? But it's just, he is so freaking cute, I gotta say. Like, and she looks at him in this way where it seems like to finally be registering for her that he actually has feelings for her. Like, she just thought that he was sort of awkward and irritating at first, but that moment is when she's like, oh no. And we look down at what he's doing, and like, I had thought that he was just sweeping up leaves or raking or something. He is scrubbing paint off of the asphalt that says no future. And we see no future later on in somebody else's room. And we'll get there. But this is the thing that's been, and I think that has to be about like the nuclear power. That's what I assumed, but maybe not, you know? So Claudia goes inside, and she is stopped by another woman who is giving her this really, really thick file of all of the financial records of this company. And she tells Claudia that it was not easy to get a hold of. And then sort of fangirls a little bit. I still can't believe we have a woman as boss, and is obviously admiring the fuck out of Claudia, who is way too preoccupied with these figures. And she looks up and just sort of nods to this woman like, yeah, okay, I don't need you anymore. What are you still doing standing here? And this woman looks crestfallen as she walks away. So again, another like important moment where Claudia is just like this whole thing about the first woman boss, that specifically does not seem to mean much to her in terms of like what she means to other people. All she sees it as is a particular obstacle for her to overcome herself in order to get where she wants to go. What I'm saying is, her ambition is not interested in the social aspect of what she's trying to do. Her ambition is solely about, I want to get here. How do I do it? Oh, being a woman is going to be a problem? Well, I guess I better pay attention to that then. It's nothing like the kind of like trailblazing, oh, I'm doing it for all of us sort of vibe. And this woman telling her, I can't believe we have another woman as boss, elicits no sort of response from her. Now, sure, she's very distracted by these numbers. Definitely. But if this meant something to her at all in this way, I still think that would have gotten her attention, you know? And it just doesn't feel like this matters to her, really. It just feels like this is what she wanted to do. And she's just ambitious, you know? And there's nothing wrong with ambition. For like, I'm ambitious as well, you know, like I'm fine with that as long as morality isn't sacrificed for the sake of it. But as we see, she is willing to sacrifice morality because there is something going on down there that she's not revealing to people. And I gotta wonder what she thought was going on because I sure fucking don't know yet. But yeah, this moment is another kind of like telling incident, you know? So, I'm going to jump ahead here. She is leaving, I think, at the end of the day. And this woman had told her that a journalist was going to be coming by to interview her about being the first woman CEO of the nuclear power plant. And it turns out that this guy is Ulrich's dad. And he is cheating on his wife, who is at home staring at the TV, waiting for her son to come home, because she is so emotionally unavailable because of her grief that he like wants to be with somebody that can take his mind off of what's going on. Now, here is the thing. It remains unclear to me at this time whether or not, and his name is Tronte, I think is how, I don't remember. It's spelled Tronte. It remains unclear to me whether or not he actually is as grief-stricken as his wife and is simply using this woman to get his mind off of it for like he's trying to distract himself, or if he is so selfish that he is just mad at his wife for not seeing to his needs and being there for him and is looking for that from anybody. I don't know which one it is. I can't tell yet. I kind of feel like from how cheery he is in this moment, that it's the latter, that he's just really, really selfish. But I don't know. And it's a weird thing because like later on, right, when we look in the future, there's something going on with him where he has like blood on the sleeves of his sweater. Now, could that be completely unrelated and just a circumstantial thing? Yes, it could. I don't know what that would be, but it could be, I guess. However, it makes me like wonder if he isn't as cut up about his son disappearing because like, he knows what happened. You know, I don't know. But in this moment, it's actually like really gross because he's trying to be like sort of charming in this moment, even though she is obviously not happy to see him and she tries to push past him. And it's clear like they've been having this affair for a minute and she is trying to get out of it. It seems like she, I think, is aware what this could do to her reputation if anybody ever found out about it as being the first like woman CEO, that this could really fuck her up. And so she is preemptively trying to get ahead of it by just disengaging with him entirely. But he decides to come to her work and tell her, you can't leave me hanging like this, which feels like he knows this is the only way that he would have been able to get her to talk to him, or even like, she doesn't say she'll meet him. She says, I'll think about it. And later on, when we see what she's doing that night, it does not seem like she went to meet him. But this is just a really gross power play on his part, because I think he is aware of what her reputation means to her and what this job means to her. And he is leveraging her fear for her rep in this moment to get her to talk to him. And it's just yuck. You know, I do not think much of this guy is what I'm saying. And I would not be surprised if he did know something about what happened to his son. Like, you know, so, okay, we have, I had already mentioned about Mikkel being at the police station. The chief like sees the injury that he has, which I guess is from falling down. I don't know. Do we know where he sustained that injury? Actually, I think it's falling, right? Because he was like climbing like crazy when he was getting out of the cave. But he assumes that this is like evidence that Ulrich basically bullied the kid into doing this thing. And he leaves Mikkel at the station while he goes and talks to Ulrich. Mikkel is poking around on his desk, finding out, like, you know, some of the information about Mads' disappearance and stuff. He takes his lighter, which turns out to be like a really lucky thing a little bit later. I want to point out that there is a solved Rubik's Cube on the desk, and I don't know if I'm supposed to think that he solved it or if that was just there already solved. But I feel like that's pretty, like, those are fucking annoying, you know? Have you ever tried to do one of those? So if he did it or if the cop did it, I feel like that means something. But anyway, he's looking through these reports. He takes the lighter and then he sees the phone sitting there and he decides to like, make some calls and try to see if he can get through to anybody. And all the numbers that he tries aren't in service yet. So, and yeah, he's looking through this and realizing that this is when his father's brother disappeared. It was just a week earlier that he vanished. And we see a photo of Mads and Ulrich together. Now, I'm not positive, but I'm assuming at this point that the body they found was Mads's body. Now, the body that they found in the present, I'm saying, that had the kid with the Walkman and everything. Now, one would think it's unclear to me whether or not he is dressed in and carrying the clothes and items that he disappeared with. Because I feel like if Mads came across this body and after the search and probably how many times he had to answer questions, I feel like it would be burned into your brain what your baby brother was wearing when he disappeared and what was missing from his room. I feel like this is something that Mads would notice when they discover the body, that like, oh my God, my brother had these shoes. Like anything like that. But it doesn't seem that he did. So it could be that Mads is like abducted and then like given props or dressed up in a certain way or, you know, just found other clothes somewhere. Like, you know, I don't know. But right now, for me, that being Mads's body makes the most sense because it feels like they use that to somehow initiate the time travel. I don't know. So yeah, anyway, I just really, I'm curious about what Ulrich knows about Mads' state when he vanished, right? So anyway, okay. So he, like I said, tries these phone numbers. We have the scene where the cop goes over to the house and like invades their space and is really aggressive. Meanwhile, Mikkel is seeing Inez, who is caring for him and being like actually receptive to the fact that he is obviously very scared and alone. She seems to really feel for him in that way, in a way that I feel like more people should have. You know what I'm saying? Like this kid, I feel like this should have raised more alarm bells for everybody, but it seems like only she really tries to connect with this little boy. And I really respect her for that a whole lot. Okay, so let's see. Jumping ahead, we go to the hospital, we're still in the hospital, and he won't talk. Mikkel won't talk to the doctor about what his name is, where he's from, anything. And obviously, like, no, you wouldn't, because you're just going to sound like a fucking lunatic. You know, he knows for sure now that he has traveled in time. And what's the point? Why try and tell anybody what's happening? Like, that's just going to make you sound like they need to put you somewhere else. And he wants to try and, like, figure out how to get back. So he's just sitting there, not responding to anything. And Inez is watching him, and she's being very, like, she's so compassionate, you know? Like, this is a good fucking nurse. She is good. And he is crying. And she puts her hand to his face and is like, everything be okay. Don't cry. You know, like, just, it's really sweet, honestly, in that moment. So a little bit later on in the day, like, it's clear that time has passed and he has just stayed sitting there. She says, you can stay here for now. Okay. Like, and he's not even looking at her. It's like, he's in shock at this point, realizing what this all means for him, that there is nobody in this world who knows who he is, that he is homeless now. Like, he won't make any sort of eye. It's rough, you know, her feeling really, what's the word I want? Her seeming so concerned feels even more justified, because this seems like a kid who's, like, cracked somehow. And she's walking away from him, and she hands him some comics and says something to read. And he tells her, as she's walking away, I come from the future. And she stops and stares at him and says, what? And he says, I come from the future. And then she looks down and she sees the comics she handed to him to read are about Captain Future. And she gets a sort of look like, oh, okay, this isn't real. He just said that because I just gave that to him. But girl, like, you gotta notice that he didn't even, like, look at those, right? Like, why would you think that, though? But of course you would think that, because that makes way more sense than that he's actually from the future. So I'm not mad at her, but also just like, oh, you were so close to getting her to listen to you, dude. So, okay. Let's go to Claudia, because she has this meeting with the former CEO. And it's just like, dude, what the fuck is up with these numbers? Y'all got me into this job, telling me a whole bunch of lies. And this shit that you, like, are hiding here, this is not what the public has heard about. These figures don't match up at all. This is out of control. Now, I don't know what numbers she's even talking about. Is she talking about financially? Is she talking about production? Is she talking about waste? Like, I don't know. But she says everywhere it's been like that for 3 months now. And he says, do you know what has changed since Chernobyl? People have lost faith in us, in nuclear power. They saw the images and they can't get them out of their heads, which is really something that this, like, show came out before the Chernobyl series. So I'm thinking that this might mean more to people who have watched that series, because I haven't watched it and I don't really plan on watching it unless somebody commissions it, because it just sounds really depressing. But he tells her fear is the worst enemy of progress. And basically we're hiding this shit because this community needs us. They need us for their livelihood. They need us for their literal power. So yeah, we're hiding things so that they don't get scared. And he takes her out to this weird spot. I don't know, like, what, if it's like a gate in the middle of the woods, which is, I assume, the spot where Alexander comes down and, gets the truck to take stuff away that we see in the present. But it's this little gated spot in the middle of the woods. And he has, the former CEO has a key for her and hands it to her and says, what we know is a drop in the ocean of what we don't know, basically. and gives her the key. So she goes in there, and I have to admire that she is not afraid to get dirty. Like, she's climbing in a hole in the ground in her fucking pumps, you know? And she has to drop down into this really creepy looking cave with nothing but a flashlight all by herself. And there are piles and piles of barrels in there with the radioactive label on it. Now, here's the thing, is that it looks on the outside like these barrels are the secret. Like, they have not been doing away with the radioactive waste the way that they were supposed to, and putting them here instead of properly disposing of them is the scandal and the secret. But I don't see that. I feel like there's something, either there's something else in those barrels besides waste. The barrels could literally just be like a barrier to something on the other side. The barrels might not even have anything to do with it. I assume they do, simply because we see Alexander in the future getting them trucked out of there. So I figure they have to be something. But I don't know what they could, like, you know, getting rid of bodies in barrels, I guess, could be a thing. That feels like so over the top cartoony, though, that each of those barrels has a body in it, that I just have a hard time thinking that's what it is. It could be full of equipment for somebody who's like trying to do time travel stuff and like failing, like this is part of their experimentation. Or I don't know, any number of like it could just be so many different things in those. But I don't feel like it's just that this is toxic waste that wasn't handled properly, you know? I don't know. So as we like move forward a little bit, we start to get to the part where the past and present begin to dovetail together. So we have the police officer, and he is in the field searching for something. It doesn't even feel like he really even knows what he's out here looking for. Like, he's investigating the deaths of all those sheep, trying to figure out what could have happened. Because as it turns out, the sheep all seem to have had a heart attack. And the coroner who's looking at the bodies is like, look, sheep are really, really fragile animals that can be literally scared to death. And it's not too difficult to do. And of course, the cop is just like, well, could it have been one person? Because he's still thinking that it's Ulrich, because he found like the sheep's hoof in Ulrich's room on his like Satan's altar. And the guy is like, it really couldn't. Like, they'd have to be really terrifying. I don't see it happening. So he's out here wandering around all by his lonesome, just trying to make sense of what could have happened. Because the one thing that's super weird that the coroner has discovered is that the eardrums of the sheep have all been blown out, which is the same thing that happened to that body that they found. And this is what's so bananas to me, is that the body's eardrums being blown out, that's one thing. That body had some sustained damage, like this face was melted off, you know. It's his eardrums being popped was really the least of my concerns, honestly. But the sheep having that happen, the fuck is that about? You know? And not only the sheep having that happen, but then when he's standing there, that's when the birds begin to fall out of the sky. So it feels like whatever's going on is happening like right beneath his feet and is affecting any animal that passes over him. And his flashlight begins to flash on and off. And we go back into town and see that all of the lights in town are also flashing on and off, and that there are hundreds of birds falling out of the sky. And these lights, again, it feels like it has to be connected to the power plant, but then it's a flashlight. That has no connection to that at all. It's a battery. Like, so, you know, I'm thinking something like electromagnetic pulses, which can affect migratory patterns, right, for birds. I don't know that it could kill them, though. I don't know that anything like that could pop the eardrums on a sheep. Like, there's parts of this that I feel like for a second start to make sense or be connected. And then I'm like, well, no, that doesn't really work actually. So God knows, I don't know. And when we see Charlotte putting a dead bird into the freezer in the basement, it turns out that there's several in there. So I'm just really hoping that she finds out about this incident, that there's lots of them that are dying. I don't know if she's been keeping track. Like, I feel like Charlotte's more on top of this than anybody knows. And it makes me in particular despise Ulrich and how cruel he was to her in the first episode, because I'm like, Ulrich, she might have been an ally. She might have been somebody valuable that could have helped you, but you had to be a dick to her for whatever reason. I'll be interested to know what that reason is. Maybe she brought up the idea of time travel for why Mads disappeared, and he was like disgusted because it seemed so ludicrous that it was like more like a joke. And I'm realizing that as the lights flash, that is when Mikkel looks around and seems to decide, like, you know what, I'm going to get out of here. Now, this could be one of two things. It could be everybody is super distracted right now, and nobody is going to notice that I'm about to jump out this window and get the fuck out of here. It could just be, I need to leave, and there was really no way for me to get out of this building without somebody noticing. And now I finally can just try and get back into that cave and see what the fuck is going on. Or it could be that the lights flashing means something to him. Because he time traveled right after all of his friends' flashlights in the woods began to flicker. I don't think it's that, because I feel like that's flashlights versus like the lights in a building might not seem like the same thing. I don't know. That just feels like a tenuous enough connection to make. I'm not sure I believe he made that. I really feel like he looked out the door and saw the chaos and was just like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go now. Like, that's what I think happened. And as the lights are flickering, we have this moment with Ulrich and Hannah. And Hannah is Jonas's mother, who winds up with Mikkel, and who is having an affair with Ulrich. Now, this scene, guys, this little girl who is playing Hannah is so good. She is so... And I'm looking at her now and I'm realizing it's not unthinkable that somebody this age could be with somebody Mikkel's age, because she seems younger than Ulrich by a bit, you know? So maybe he is Mikkel. Like, I don't know. But this scene, because I had been, you know, earlier when they were having an affair and she says, I love you, and he doesn't say it back. And then she's like trying to kiss him after his son disappears and he doesn't want anything to do with her. I just kind of thought that this was an affair that blossomed out of the death of her husband. That she was so lonely after he was gone that she reached for this person to fill that void. Pun intended. And now I'm seeing this scene and realizing that this is much worse than I thought. It's obvious that she has been in love with Ulrich for a minute. It's been a couple decades, okay? And this bitch is not letting go. And this adds a whole other layer of, like, heart-wrenching to the fact they could have been having an affair for long before Mikkel killed himself. Like, I just assumed it started after his death. That is not necessarily the case at all. And I don't know, you know, I really don't. Like, I just feel so bad for her now in the present, taking scraps from somebody that she has intense, long-lasting feelings for. And that's all she gets. That's just cruel. And, you know, like, and she's smart, you know, like in this scene, she's clever and she's funny. She has something to offer and she's wasting it with this self-involved douche. And that's not really fair. Ulrich isn't like completely heartless, but he is 100% taking advantage of somebody who really cares about him. And he knows that they do. And he just doesn't seem at all concerned about what that's going to do to her. I mean, I don't know. It's just the finding out that she has been into him for this long, literally grade school it goes back to, just makes the whole situation that much more pathetic. And I don't mean that in a like, she's pathetic. I mean, the whole thing, it's just, there's a pathos to it. That's just, it's so much worse. So anyway, yeah, I really like the scene of them together as well. The way that she's like, the world, if it started all over again, what would you wish for? And he says, a world without Wyndon. And that seems like not what she was hoping to hear, or anything that she could particularly work with, because I feel like she's trying to find a way to flirt, and that's not really making itself apparent. And she just sort of goes with it, you know. It's just really understandable why he would be appealing to a girl, period. Not just a girl her age, which was what I was about to say. He is very attractive. He's got something, you know, and I'm really impressed with the casting of this show, because it's really tempting to just grab actors that look like the older actor to represent them and just get somebody whose face sort of lines up. And they've done a lot more than that here. They found somebody who looks like Ulrich for sure, but also has that something that Ulrich has now. And that's like a sort of indefinable, there's a swagger, you know, and he has it, and it doesn't feel affected. It doesn't feel like somebody who's like putting on a show for everyone else. This feels like who he is. And I'm really impressed that they got that with him. And I'm really impressed with the little girl that is playing Charlotte. I say little girl, she's probably like 25, but she has the same focus, serious, like, there's a real, what's the word I want here? There's something about her that seems so hyperlogical right on her face. Like, you can see she would, you know, honestly, the woman who plays her now would probably make a pretty good Terminator. But that's not to say that she's emotionless. She's just, you can see the thoughts, the intelligence is in her eyes, and there's this like stillness to her that makes you think that there's a billion things happening in her mind right behind. And I think the actress that plays her as a kid really nails that as well. And this little girl, like I said, that's playing Hannah she looks like Hannah. She's got that same sort of open, sweet face, but she's like smart. There's something about her that feels innocent, but also like she's very conscious at the same time. You know, I don't know. There's just, I'm really impressed with the casting and the acting. And these are tricky things with time travel specifically that I could see getting wrong, because you just decide to go with somebody who looks like they are representative of the other person. So then we have like the pairing up of everybody from the past to the present and what they're doing. So we have Regina, and she's putting on lipstick and looking in the mirror, and it seems like it's almost like she's sort of trying to make herself feel better about herself, you know? She puts the lipstick on, and she pulls off her robe and is looking at herself. And I'm really curious, is she looking at herself like trying to tell if she's sexually attractive? Is she looking at herself because she has other scars from self-harm that are on her body, and she's like observing that? Like, I'm curious about it. But like in the present, we have the same Regina, and she is also in a robe, but she takes the robe off so that she can give herself a breast exam, which is really interesting. Like, is she somebody, and she's crying as she does this, like, is she somebody who has a trauma, you know, that goes beyond her own mental illness. There's something about that moment that's so sad and feels so significant. I don't know what that's about, you know? And then we go to Charlotte, and she is sitting on top of the freezer that's got a bunch of dead birds in it. And she's looking through her journal, and then present day Charlotte is outside the police station looking at the dead bird and, like, you know, clearly being like, what the fuck is happening again? And then we have Ulrich, who is looking into the same room in both. Oh, my bad. I skipped over Jana, who is laying in bed as her husband comes home in the middle of the night. Like, I don't know if he was out hooking up with, like, if Claudia left that weird cave and then went to meet him, or if he's just having an affair with somebody else, like Claudia didn't show up, so he just went to a bar and met up with somebody, or if he just spent some time out waiting for Claudia, she didn't show up, and he went home and it just happened to be really late. But any of those, like, Jana is laying there, and she, like, is just pretending to have been asleep, but not even trying to pretend that hard. He's just acting like he doesn't notice that she's awake, you know? And I want to know whether she even really gives a shit that he's been having an affair, or if it's just, she's kind of like, good, go out there and get what you need from somebody else, because I don't have it to offer, so fuck you. And then we see her in the present, Jana laying in bed and looking over, and her husband just straight up is not home. This is not, you know, this is not the same situation. It does not feel like he's out having an affair. It feels like there's a whole other thing happening now. So yeah, then we go to Ulrich, and he is sitting looking in at his brother's side of the room, because it looks like they share a bedroom. It might just be his brother's room though. But he's looking at this empty room, and Ulrich in the present is looking at this room as well, because somebody who was in this room is missing again. And I'm just, that's fucking harsh. And his wife in the present is asleep in Mikkel's bed. And it is just, guys, I can't deal with it, with this kind of loss, like, and the complete helplessness that you must feel, you know? And seeing this, he just kind of is like, you know what? Fuck this. And he goes and gets his car, and he gets a flashlight, and he gets a goddamn crowbar, and he goes into this cave and goes up to that motherfucking door that has the radioactive symbol on it, and he tries to pry the door open, which you fucking would, wouldn't you? And he can't do it. That shit is solid, and he really gives it his everything, but he cannot get it open. And as he's struggling with that in the present, Mikkel is running through the cave in the past, and he falls and goes down this sort of like chute, ramp sort of something. And he slides down, and he winds up getting injured enough that it's almost like he thinks he's going to be trapped there for a second. But he manages to, like, pull himself out of there. But as he's trapped down there, he can hear Ulrich pounding on the door in the present. Yo. What? Excuse me. I don't know, guys. What the fuck? Because it's tempting. I got really mad initially when Ulrich hears Mikkel yelling, and he doesn't start himself yelling. Because I feel like that would be your response is, hello, Mikkel! You know, because he just starts going, Mikkel, Mikkel, and then they do not connect. And I wonder if he had started yelling, and Mikkel started yelling in response to him, would they have found one another? Because there is a sort of like portal there. Or would they have come up against some sort of blockage that kept them from actually reaching each other? They could hear one another, but they couldn't physically reach one another. Or am I just supposed to think that him pounding on the door is what Mikkel hears, and that's not actually it? That they just line those up to sort of trick me? I don't think so, because we hear Mikkel shouting. We hear it in the present, so I'm pretty sure they almost like, so part of me is just like, I got so frustrated because I was just, oh my God, they just missed each other and they could have met up. It could have, like, if he had just yelled a little longer, or if Ulrich had yelled louder in response, I felt that. But then I was like, I'm not even sure that's true. You know, that might be what I'm supposed to think. And it's not actually, I don't know. And it ends with each of them climbing up out of the cave and sitting outside of the cave looking dejected. Like, there's a sense that they were each aware of the other. I don't know if, Mikkel knew that was his dad. I don't know if he knew that was Mikkel. But there is something about the way they both sit and start crying that is such the kind of despair that only comes from acute disappointment, that it feels like they, in their guts, somehow know that they almost had it, that they almost fixed it, and then they didn't. It's just, oh God, it kills me. So then the very last scene, we are in a clockmaker's shop, perhaps not a clockmaker, perhaps just a repairer. And he is working on this contraption that the stranger in the present, who came out of the cave and picked up the dead bird and everything, had in his hotel room. And it looks like he's building it from scratch, and he flips the switch as if to sort of like test it out. But we just see the parts whirring. We don't actually see anything seem to happen from it. And when the camera turns around and we see his face, this is the guy from the videos that we saw playing when Eric was getting strapped into the machine. This is the dude who was talking about traveling through time and what would we be willing to do to see if it would work. And I don't know what this machine is meant to do, because like I said, he flicks the switch on the machine and it does not seem like anything happens that we can tell. So I don't know what to make of it at all. So yeah, I don't know. The fact that this is like the man in that video is actually being involved in this universe more than just, I really thought that he was just a background figure that was one of a variety of different people that this person was watching, and that he was not meant to be important in any way. But now that I'm seeing, like, am I supposed to think that he's the one that's like the wearing the hooded rain jacket and actually strapping Eric into the machine? I don't think so. But like, what do I know? And is this happening in the past, or is this happening in the present? I'm not sure about that either. So yeah, that's the end of the episode. Michael is in the chat, says, I was so grateful when the show did this montage. I had been struggling to connect the 1986 cast with their older selves. Yeah, I really owe a lot to that website, Meta Witches, for that list of characters with their past and present photos on the wall. It helped a lot. And it's just pure luck that I've managed to remember the names that I have, because I had a pretty good run this episode. Like, I was able to remember everybody's names except for the cop. And again, I don't remember if we've met Claudia in the future. I don't think so, but I could be wrong. The actress looks super familiar though. But yeah, anyway, so again, thank you to Jill for commissioning this, because this show is really, really good. And I hope that you guys all have found this as captivating as I have. And I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm really lost. So I think I'm probably going to finish this and go and watch the next one right away. So thank you again, everybody, for listening. And I'll just see you again soon with a new episode. Commission one if you have the chance. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.